Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for this day.
REI Co-op presents a perfect outdoor moment with the perfect gift.
Woo!
Picture this. You're ripping with your favorite person. Bluebird skies, blower powder, and frankly, you're skiing like legends.
So sick. Another lap?
Thanks to REI's curation, from lid to sticks, you nailed the gift.
No way. How'd you know?
Does it get more perfect than that? Give without guessing. Shop in store or visit rei.com.
Welcome to this week's episode of Safe Room, the horror video game podcast and proud member of Bloody Disgusting's Bloody FM podcast network. I'm your host, Jay Krieger.
And I'm the other one, Neil Bolt.
And this week we're attempting to survive the immersive sim horrors of Black-Eyed Priest games, aka Jordan King's Skinfreak, where lowly office worker Belle is called into the office late one night, tasked by her boss with installing a software update. But what begins as a minor annoyance devolves into a living hell, as the notorious serial killer Skinfreak is stalking Belle through the halls of the office, making for a shift she's not soon to forget. So, Jordan King's work is no stranger to these parts, as we've extensively covered past games. Just recently we covered Sniper Killer last year. Which, that was one of those games that, coming off of, the coattails of Night of the Gates of Hell, and previously we'd covered Bloodwash. It's one of those things where it's a developer that we've become very fond of very quickly. And that's not just because of, the B-movie sensibilities and the sort of presentation that comes with being a game that is underneath that puppet combo umbrella, if you will, right? It's more about, I think, a developer that we were really taken with, because with each subsequent release, we're not only seeing like that style being refined more and more, but, I think mechanically speaking as well, you're able to see a lot of growth in terms of those types of experiences over a relatively short period of time. And so I think for those reasons, it's why, we've really been taken with Black-Eyed Priest's games. So in building off of that, while we're very familiar, and people that have been listening to the show for a good while are familiar with why these types of games really resonate with us, I guess we could start with, for you, Neil, like, what is it about Jordan King's approach to game design and sort of like a quality of their work that differentiates their flavor of horror from other games that have been released underneath the Puppet Combo umbrella?
I think it's because it's closer to a lot of Italian sort of horror / genre movie things, like the scuzziness, the griminess. Games like this and Sniper Killer especially sort of evoke one of my favorite things, which is that sort of 70s, 80s scuzzy New York vibe, where everything is horrible and like that, and doing it in this sort of low poly way is really appealing. And it's because, as we discussed before, like with puppet combos games in general as well, it's the idea of it being less about being survival horror homages and more about being 80s slasher movie, sort of homages instead, and really presenting it that way. I think what Black-Eyed Priest has done in the last few games is sort of build up to an even more sort of cinematic approach to it, you know, in terms of how everything comes up and how everything is presented. And I think Night at the Gates of Hell was like such a confident way of addressing that, and really did feel that same sort of scuzzy nightmare vibe that was in like Italian zombie cinema. And then, you know, Sniper Killer just went even further in terms of like really getting that seedy, grimy, blood-soaked sort of stuff. And yeah, it's just something about a time and a place, and it feeling like the emptiness of these night sort of levels that most of these games are in as well. Yeah, it's just and the storytelling has just come on leaps and bounds, I think, as well. Into like Bloodwash was such a self-contained thing, and you know, probably make up as much as like the prologue of this game in terms of like in some ways, but it was so effective in telling a story, you know, a story that you could argue is still being done in pieces here, but it was like, yeah, I had to admire how it sort of built the tension, built the atmosphere, the red herrings. I mean, there are now sort of signatures, you could say, to the games of Black Oak Priest, which are, you know, they're scuzzy, a desolate city usually, and you usually have a bunch of creepy sort of red herrings to who's after you, which is great. And sense of humor kind of helps as well. It's that sort of 80s sort of sensibility about things, and like really sort of using the world they're in to make these sort of seedy, silly jokes, and they work so well. But yeah, I think it just captures something about this nostalgia for a time and place isn't quite so casual and broad, I suppose. Like when you sort of think of this old nostalgia for 80s horror, there's very particular ideas what the majority of people would have that be. And for me, this is a lot closer to what I have a nostalgia for of those times, and not just necessarily about horror, but about like a lot of cinema from those sort of decades.
It's been very refreshing to follow a developer for as long as we have, and to see them tap into, like you've been saying, this sort of scuzzy B-movie aspects of certain genres. But what is very refreshing, I think, about Jordan King's vision for horror is that it's tackling a variety of different horror influences rather than just sort of like a retreading of what's worked previously. Now, you know, that's not to say that they don't sort of, the developer and they're within like sort of has those familiar staples, because they're definitely there, right? You've got that sort of red herring approach to characters that you've mentioned. They have a very similar sense of humor that is present within all of their games. But again, like utilizing a variety of horror subgenre influences and also having mechanics that match those subgenre influences in a way that makes sense for the types of experience that they are crafting each time. And I think that, you know, something that you said definitely rings true in terms of the approach to storytelling in these games, because of the fact that, you know, the way that Skinfreak opens is with a nearly, you know, 30, 40-minute prologue that features, you know, gameplay mechanics, but also the fact that you're taking the reins of a character that does not end up being the protagonist, which was also the case in Sniper Killer, right? You're given basically this very short mini prologue where you're in the shoes of somebody else that is inconsequential to the overall story and narrative of Sniper Killer, but at the same time, like, it's very specific in the inclusion of that prologue because of the fact it gives you a flavor of the killer, the scuzziness, the vibe overall of Sniper Killer. And to see, you know, the developer take that one step further in an even more prolonged prologue segment with Skinfreak, but at the same time, it's including like new mechanics. Like it's a whole driving mechanic because you play as a taxi driver, Max, who's driving around. You've got this much larger environment that we're used to for these types of experiences. And yet you're just driving around and picking up these random weirdo characters that, you know, some of them are half drunk or, you know, maybe cognitively declined or just absolute freaks in their own right, wanting to get dropped off under bridges at weird sex clubs and things along these lines. But it's all done in service of not only like desolate world building of this creepy place, as you mentioned, but also again, like it's exploring the world of Skinfreak with a new sort of mechanic, which is just like driving around free reign and whatnot. So I think for me, like that was the first indication that like, okay, we're getting a continuation of Jordan King's sort of like sensibilities as a developer, where we're going to push things a little bit further in terms of the type of experience people can expect, even if maybe some of the approaches to humor are like similar, but that's what, a signature brand, if you will, is all about.
Yeah, I mean, some of the dialogue between the protagonists of that section and the characters that get in the back, the passengers, is like some of the funniest stuff that's been written in these games. And considering again, we've had like aspects of that all the way back to Bloodwash, like the memorable sort of bus ride with the creepy man and things like that, and doing all these different ways of doing that. Yeah, again, it's capturing like the idea of like working late at night in any job and the kind of people that generally tend to be out at that time, like that. It's broad strokes sort of stuff, but it does it really effectively. Like the guy who's like really drunk and basically just animated in a way that when he does get out the car, it's funny as hell when he's sort of like staggering all this way and that. And but it's like an extended version of what we've had in terms of like building certain tensions, but you can see where the refinements have come, from game to game. Like we all know to a degree, I think, after a little bit that it doesn't feel like this guy's gonna be lasting, beyond this very long into this game. Partly because of what we saw with Sniper Killer, but partly because it's just giving you every vibe you ever got from that sort of 80s sort of slasher thing. And but the fun is it's how that sort of built up and the sort of very doomy sort of way it's put across, and the warnings and like the very obvious, oh god, like when he's called back to the taxi office, like it's just like we know where this is going. like totally, but which is fine because that's exactly what you watch those movies for, is like what's going to happen to a degree. The fun is like figuring out the why and the who sort of it, and this has got a lot of sort of giallo sort of inspiration in terms of like the killer and just the structure underneath it all. And so that whole thing with just driving a taxi around this really quiet, desolate place, and again, it's the limitations of the game, in terms of like the visuals and what you can put in the world, and so there's no real reason why you would just put a bunch of people in the world for nothing, like that, if you don't have to. But I think it just sells it being like this dead, rotting city in a way, in that regard, and like every place you do go to or hear about has that to some degree. It's broken down, there's nobody around, and it just generally doesn't look like a very pleasant place to be. And that's great. It works so well. And so what is probably a limitation / sort of shortcut to focusing on other things is actually quite a benefit for this game, and really adds to it, especially considering that we know that the developer can do that, can add crowds and things like that. We saw it with Sniper Killer, there were aspects of that where there's more population. But I think here, I don't know, it's like it reminds me a lot of like Manhunt's Casa City, in the sense of like what it might have been before it was like gone. Like there's just the dregs sort of hanging on, and that again speaks to a lot of, I suppose, places in big cities in America in the 70s and 80s where there was that fear of like, oh, they're just these ghost towns that like, and it's just all murder and that, and it sort of made reality, I suppose, like the real reality of it. So I'm it was a really good introduction and like a great extension of what we've seen Jordan do.
No, I think that's very well said, because it's the type of thing where when you're thinking about a developer that jumps around between various subgenre influences, you might have that worry where it's the type of thing where you're like, okay, it's great that there's this variety, but at a certain point, maybe this developer is going to take a leap into a subgenre that they're not as well versed in as perhaps what's worked with them previously. And then that might be reflected in terms of a game where it's like, or they clearly have seen some films or whatnot in this subgenre, but maybe they were not as versed in that subgenre, sort of like cinematic style or storytelling lexicon as they should have been. Whereas here, making that leap into Giallo, it was the type of thing where, me personally, I'm not as much of a fan of Giallo films as the previous subgenre horror influences that were in Night of the Gates, Sniper Killer, and Bloodwash. And yet, without even going into spoilers naturally for the story, I found that it was the type of thing where Giallo was the exact subgenre that worked for this type of game. It being an immersive sim game, but also just from a straight up like narrative standpoint, the ways in which it's handled in terms of a variety of red herrings, not just in the traditional sense like we see in the prologue, where it's like, yeah, there's a handful of creepy ass fucking passengers that Max gets. It's like, yeah, it could be any of these people, maybe, other than maybe the lady that tries to pay with a button or does pay with a button. But when the game kind of like gets out of that and actually puts you in control of Bella, and you go amongst and you're reading emails and various computers, and you're like, oh, it could be, what if it's her boss? What if it's one of these weird coworkers? What if it's this other person, this delivery person that shows up? But there's it's the exact sort of like narrative vagueness that there should be, in that you present multiple candidates that could be the killer, but having the wherewithal to be like, yeah, you can't come on too strongly with any one of them. If you're going to have these people be potential candidates, they all need to be over the top. And then what's very refreshing, I think, is that you get the killer reveal at the end, and it's somebody you would never expect because they just, present like everybody else. They're either weird, they come on too strongly, that type of a thing. So it was really just like very refreshing to see a developer, dive into the next genre influence and also dive into a different sort of gameplay influence here. And it all really just kind of like coalesce into the next chapter in their career, which clearly, has been indicative of someone that continually pushes sort of like the envelope in terms of what they delivered in the previous game, and doing so in a way that just comes, full circle in that regard.
Yeah, I know they wanted to do like a grimy sort of 70s crime style game at some point, and I think they've been doing bits and pieces of that with the last couple of games, like adding aspects of that, especially with Sniper Killer. There was that too. And I think that's where a smart way of sort of getting across like the things you are knowledgeable about and sort of bleed them into what your work currently is, and like without sort of rehashing the same thing over and over again. Like it could be very easy to get tired of just doing straight up horror if you're wanting to do something a bit different. But if you get to sort of dabble in a bit of the other stuff you like and add that into your games, that helps too. And I do think that it definitely shines through with this one. That you do feel a confidence in like not just in the handling of horror, but like in sprinkling in these other things and making it about other influences, but also like in terms of the game and making it the game more like varied. We saw that again with Sniper Killer, was like doing all these different things, and like if you, in a way, only if, because we've sort of followed the developers' sort of history so far, it was like, oh, I can see where this bit's from this bit, this bit's from this game, and like that, and it almost feels like all these pieces getting put together, and like that could be bad because you could say, okay, so it's just like taking 4 games and stapling them together and calling that variety, but it's not. It's like it's made into a coherent whole, and like the storytelling, as I said, in the last couple of games have been like fantastic in that regard to really like elevate what was already fairly solid stuff. And yeah, like the whole thing with the killer and who could be the killer in here is definitely made better by what I was saying about like the city and the fact that it just has loads of people like that. So it's like it makes it a lot harder to sort of guess who's going to be like the worst or best candidate in this case.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is that when you're going through the various characters that you're meeting, um, the benefit is that they could all be potential, you know, killer reveals and whatnot. And I think that that's the way that, I think that's where this essential sort of like brand, if you will, of games that fall underneath that puppet combo umbrella really are able to excel, in that it is a collection of developers that understand the subgenres and the strengths, the inherent strengths of those subgenres are tapping into. So the stories are being presented in a way that abides by those, core tenets of the subgenres, right? So what ended up being, I think, the most surprising, but when you actually, get through the game and reflect on it, you're like, oh, it's actually not that surprising, is that I didn't end up spending a lot of time while I was playing Skinfreak worrying about who the killer was. I was more focused on, the aspect of investigating the Bond Plaza, which we're going to get into in terms of like the immersive sim focus on this game, what separates and differentiates it so much from previous games that not only we've played um, from Jordan King, but also just underneath the Puppet Combo umbrella, and what those games, the variety of gameplay experiences that they provide. But it was the type of game that, the pacing is one that I think, again, like understands that subgenre, but also allows the gameplay itself to kind of like be the star of it, right? It's that when I'm personally watching a Giallo film, yeah, obviously I want to know who the killer is, but I find that the ones that I appreciate the most in terms of films in that subgenre, like what is it, Blood and Lace? Those are the types of films where I'm so enamored with the characters and their relationships and whatnot. I'm more focused on that, and I almost forget, like, oh yeah, I want to know who's actually doing all of this. And I think that's the best compliment I can give to Skin Freak, is that I become so enamored with just like the mechanics and the immediacy of an immersive sim, where it's like, okay, here's this issue, I want to find this solution to it, and going about that in a way that, might be a little bit off the beaten path. But I think that those end up being just as important milestones in solving those little environmental puzzles as it is learning the actual killer's identity at the end of the day.
Yeah, and one of the things you could sort of level at games with this sort of PSX style is that it means you kind of do lose a bit of flavor in terms of environments if you're not like making them compact. And well, this game really blows out of the water, I think. Like you could say in that prologue, oh yeah, all the streets are empty and you're going through very basic bleak things, but for the reasons I explained, that works fine for that. But yeah, once you get into the office building and all the stuff around that and just how detailed it is, yeah, it suddenly becomes a place. Like you feel like you're in a lived space. And one of the things that's noted is the lighting is very inspired by the Giallo films, and that is another big strength of those films. It's just like the environments are just wow a lot of the time, especially like Gento. Like there's stuff there where you just go, woof, it's amazing. Or even the barbers, or both of the barbers. It's just something that stands out, and it's really quite impressive that I think that the lighting is as good as it is, for what is, such a low poly sort of look, and being quite blocky and almost too large in spaces, like, which is, I mean, like there's a section where you go across the road from your office building to like a gas station type place, and it's so bleak out there and desolate and wide open, and it's like it's that unreality about it all that makes it feel like unnerving. Like that's what adds to the horror, that it's like it's recognizable but it doesn't feel right. And yeah, the lighting on top of that now as well just really just pushes it beyond. It doesn't feel like disconnected stuff like that. It just feels like, I don't know, a sense of wonder that I kind of had with like some games of that era of visuals, where you'd be like gobsmacked that anything could feel connected and like open like that, and yet here it is. And it's kind of like getting that all over again with these games, because they're getting bigger, more open, more stuff could be achieved. And you think of like the origins, of like these And yeah, it's like it all makes sense, but it's all like, wow, how would you get from there to there? And like, a year on from the last game you put out as well, like just to really push it, like this is quite something.
Well, that's kind of what we've been speaking to in terms of just like seeing each game grow, not only in terms of the subgenres that they dabble in, but in terms of whether it's mechanics or whether it's presentation, just getting to see like the variables of these worlds in, Black Eyed Peas games kind of like continue to grow and to continue to be reflective of the subgenres that they're dealing with. Because like what you're saying, the presentation here is again of a caliber where it's like you get to see these little incremental updatings, doesn't feel like the right way to describe it, but just like additions to the presentations of these worlds. Because we should give a little bit of context, I suppose, in that once you change from the prologue game's actual protagonist, you play as the office worker who then finds himself in the Bond Plaza, which is this basically giant office building. Naturally, it's only them and the security guard. And, this office building is, I think the best way to describe it is like a state of the art Nakatomi Plaza, right? From like Die Hard, where, it's an office building, but there's these little weird sort of like technology tweaks to it. So there's like an automated robot that you can converse with that goes around the floor and cleans, or to aid the sort of like immersive sim nature of this game, which means you can have an inventory, discover new items, pick up items, drop items, but to like navigate the sort of issue of dropping an item and then, having to have it stay there rather than reloading into an environment. There's this like lost and found robot basically that has a room dedicated to it, that if you go to that room and interact with it, it will find any item that you've previously dropped and immediately give it back to you. Right. So there's these like little touches here and there that they might be, I suppose you could call them like MacGuffins, if you will, to like certain development backend issues of having items spawn in environments periodically based on where the player drops them. But like that all allows this to be an office building that maybe defies some of the logic that would be tied to the time period, but ultimately it allows for an environment that's very much sort of like complementing the immersive sim nature. You're going to pick up certain things, you're going to lose them, so that way you can pick up more immediate items. But at the end of the day, like it's a setting that I think is perfect for this type of game. In terms of that, like for you, like what was the aspect of the immersive sim sort of approach that stood out to you the most in terms of like providing more variety for a Jordan King experience?
Considering everything else, I did wonder if it would be a bit too simplified at first. And yet, I think there is like a flexibility to how you can go about things. Like there's an innocuous thing about like the security guard bemoaning the fact that he sat on his donut and doesn't have a donut for the evening. It's like, and depending, next you could end up going to the floor that has the break room and making that and making yourself some coffee, like getting that donut and giving him that. But it's like, but you don't necessarily have to do that. You can do other things. And I don't know, it's the way it sort of drops the hints of what's going to be needed and it not being exactly what you expected. Like sometimes, like the solution for the elevator button is like not what I would have and kind of funny in the context of like the prologue as well. But yeah, it's very. It takes a little while to sort of get into the idea that it is quite immersive sim-esque like that. I mean, it's also very survival horror-esque because they are, quite close bedfellows in that regards, and which is quite amusing when you think about it. When we said that, the whole thing of these games was like they're not being survival horror game homages, they're being like 80s movies homages, and yet this is now a legit sort of survival horror in many ways in terms of like. But I think adding that sort of thing to drop stuff in the levels and like and free up inventory space that way, and then should you forget, like I said, having the Miss Apple, the doesn't even know what her own acronym means, but like that is it's a goofy but in universe sort of way to do something like that. And yeah, the first time I discovered you could just drop something, I was like, oh, okay. I didn't expect to be able to do that. And again, it's a subversion of like these kind of games now where you think, oh, well, you only be able to do this much like that. And I think we were having that talk recently, where it is just like a deceptive thing about like going back to a retro style and kind of having your expectations set there and not always thinking, well, no, we've moved on and we can do things in these spaces that we couldn't do then because we have all that knowledge and we have different ideas and ideals for that. And so, yeah, you can push more of an immersive sim into a game that looks like it was made 30 years ago. And it's not a problem like that. And it works because we know how to do that in terms of like that. I say we, like I'm making it, but no, it's like as a gaming nexus that we all are. Yeah, it is impressive that it manages to do that. And that was just like, it was mind blowing. Again, it goes back to this idea of like feeling almost nostalgic for like playing those things all over again, where like, it's amazing. I keep getting surprised by something like that is limited in how it looks. Now, like I said, that is the great subversion, I think, of it. And yeah, it's not like it's ever bothered me that these games look like they do, because I love that. I love what they look like. I love what they bring to that. But I think this is like the first real attempt to sort of push that beyond those expectations, even more than Sniper Killer, which like did some smart things. But this, yeah, like when it starts becoming like that, I mean, don't go expecting like arcane levels of stuff here, but it's like it does stuff that fits within the kind of games that Dark Priest can make. It's absolutely that kind of imsim.
Yeah, and I think that the aspect that I was talking about previously, like having the ability to find any item that you drop, when you have a game such as this that consists of essentially, for a majority of the game, it's 6 floors, right? It's like, yeah, I don't want to have to remember the exact location of where I dropped something, right? So having certain concessions like that compared to, maybe other more, describe them as hardcore immersive sims, right? Where it's a little less about that type of a thing. I find that those concessions for the scope of this type of immersive sim experience is perfectly fine because of the fact that, again, I'm keeping that scope in mind. But I think that ultimately what made Skinfreak really click and resonate with me is that it's along the lines of what you said, which is that you have free reign of this building. And yeah, you might choose to do the donut portion earlier, or you can find yourself in a situation like I did, which is early on, I'm in the break room and I'm like, oh, I'll put a coffee mug in this coffee pot and drink a cup of coffee and see what happens. And it's like, oh, that gave me a boost to my character's speed. And then I completely disregarded the coffee mug. And then I find out an hour later, oh, I need that coffee mug to solve a puzzle. I don't know where the fuck I dropped that an hour ago. I have no idea. And so I just utilize, again, that aspect of like, oh, I can find any item that I need. And, I don't know, maybe some people would be like, oh, I don't really like that option. But I find that like it circumvents the annoyance of having to backtrack for 15 or 20 minutes perhaps to try to find that item. And so I can still allow the pacing of this game to like move at a pace that I think for a game that probably takes, what would you say, 2 or 3 hours to complete. Like I want to get through that in a way that is fitting rather than backtracking and chasing down various items that I need. And I think that ultimately, like the notion of player choice and how they choose to progress through the environments, like I already know that I skipped one of the late game decisions, right? It's like I came to a room that was suddenly unlocked that had been locked previously, but I skipped it to prioritize a mission or, a mini objective basically that I skipped earlier because I wanted to see what was there. And then in circumventing that obvious sort of like major plot progression, I ended up triggering something else story related that kind of like discounted that chance of having an earlier progression. This is all like very convoluted for people who haven't played the game, but like it there are those choices to be made, even if the scope of this immersive sim is not as large, perhaps, as the types of immersive sims of the arcane variety that people are accustomed to. But I think that it still is very tried and true to the core essence of what it means to be an immersive sim.
Yeah, and so going back to what you're saying about like the item finding thing, and like how people might not like that. Even I think the developers sort of understand how it's like, okay, it's just a roundabout way of getting to that point. Like the sort of, and probably has one of the best jokes in the game when like, Belle sarcastically asks like, "Can you find my dignity?" And it responds, "It was like you have to possess something first to lose it." It's like, so yeah, I love that. It's like even those things and I think just having what it is, this like big brained like thing, and like just the whole delivery of that thing is made funny because of the way it's set up. So it's a good way to sort of get around these sort of ways of sorting these problems out and making them feel like a bigger deal as well, which is the best thing about it. And it adds a few characters that you probably wouldn't have had normally as well. It's just surreal and weird, and I think that sort of nature of the building having this personality in it, that it is just like an office building, but once you get these little bits and bobs to it are different. Okay, this is why you always love those sort of spaces in those kind of games, because they always have some kind of personality that goes beyond the obvious. And so it's endearing in that it looks like an office building in so many ways, but it's just like the odd touches that make it like, what the fuck, like that AI lost and found system, or like the cleaning robot, or the fact that the break room is decorated so gaudily, like someone's front room from the 1930s or something. Like, it's just great. I love all those sort of things about it, and just the stuff with the computers as well, like just the basic version of like you can read email conversations between people and stuff like that, or indeed play a couple of little games in there as well. There's games within games now. This is how far the whole thing has come now, where you have like literally like what is it, a point and click puzzle game. See, even this week we didn't get away from doing a point and click puzzle game. Which was it, the House of the Necromancer, which I found like there was a very funny sort of parody of the sort of make a choice and it just be like death, like that. Just like that was a funny joke, and that's like a side scroller, isn't it? Shotgun, I think it's called.
Yep.
Just like, and it sort of ties into like Belle's character that she likes to make games on the side, and like that sort of shared them around the office with people and like getting email exchanges about that. Again, really cool way to sort of integrate like having these little games on the computers and a reason for them like that. It's like, it's not just stuff thrown in there to sort of pad out runtime, if you will. It's stuff that feels connected and feels like a point to it. And who doesn't want to sit in a workplace playing games on the computer instead of doing the actual work? It's like, it's too tempting like that. But even like going in the recycling bins and stuff and finding this stuff that like people don't want you to see, sort of thing as well. But and just technology being used, like the phones and like just checking in at the front desk and whatever, and or checking with the boss, and like having office gossip, even though you're not really seeing many people around. And I don't know, it captures the essence of the place, whilst adding this sort of absurd side to it that is very much like it's a video game, but also a Black Eyed Peas video game.
I have a lot more to say about several of the things that you just mentioned, but I think we need to take a quick break, and when we come back, maybe we can delve even a little deeper into some of the aspects of the world building and the approach to making the Bond Plaza feel like a lived-in space, and how that just really does complement, again, that immersive sim nature of Skinfreak's design approach. But we will have more on that in a moment.
This episode is brought to you by Nature's Bounty. Nature's Bounty believes your body is brilliant, naturally designed to thrive, inside and out. For those always looking for new ways to support your health from head to heels, Nature's Bounty has a range of over 400 vitamins and supplements born from 50 years of trust and care. Nature's Bounty. It's in your nature. Visit naturesbounty.com to learn more.
With new, gentler scented Clorox disinfecting wipes, clean finally smells as good as it feels on everything from lamps to ceiling fans, even on your kid's toy shark. Oh, ouch. Clorox disinfecting wipes, now available in crisp lemon. Find it on Amazon. Clorox, clean feels good.
Hi, I'm here to pick up my son Milo. There's no Milo here.
Who picked up my son from school?
Streaming only on Peacock.
I'm gonna need the name of everyone that could have a connection.
You don't understand. It was just the 5 of us.
So this was all planned.
What are you gonna do? I will do whatever it takes to get my son back.
I honestly didn't see this coming. These nice people killing each other.
All Her Fault, a new series streaming now only on Peacock.
And we're back from our break, and you listed a great many things that I think are very strong qualities too. Again, the approach to world building here. So I'm going to try to remember exactly the order that you gave them in, but we'll see how that goes, as it usually does. But I guess we should start with, House of the Necromancer and Shotgunner, which are, again, the 2 mini games that you can find on various PCs in the office itself. And, it's one of those things where we've obviously seen plenty of games that have included mini games that are discoverable in themselves. Like what always comes to mind is in like Doom 3, there's a game where it's basically like you can punch chickens and they explode or something like that. Like little examples like that. But here, the 2 games, House of the Necromancer and Shotgunner, are 2 they feel like full-fledged games that are so true to their subgenres. And, House of the Necromancer, especially like a retro point and click puzzle game. And initially I just assumed like, oh, this will be, a 5-minute thing. It'll be vaguely tied to the genre that it's in, and then I'll just move on. But no, it's like, this is a hardcore retro point and click puzzle game where if you make the wrong decision, it's not like, yeah, you use the wrong item, try again. It's like, no, you'll die and have to restart to a certain point. And it's like brutally difficult in that 90s point and click style. And I really loved it for that. In the fact that, despite it being, one of the older genres of games, it is filled with content that you would never find in a game of its era, right? This notion of like, you encounter, I think it's like a goblin that's asleep, and then it's like, oh, if you wake him up, what does he do? He doesn't just kill you, but he like rips out your throat or eats your face or something like that. And it's always great to see a developer that is able to include things such as this, but like really commit to the bit, if you will. He really provides an experience that is true to the hardcore nature of point and click games, but also the hardcore nature of the horror that's found not only in Skinfreak, but also in House of the Necromancer and even Shotgun, right? The fact that that game is like a side-scrolling shooter that's not only hardcore, but also is very gory or bloody. And like, that's a quality that I think a lot of games that try to have these mini discoverable games in them, it's like more often than not, it's either like something that's too easy, so you get through it in just a few moments and you're like, what was even the point of including that? Or it doesn't, or it abides by, the era with which the gameplay style is evoking, but that also is evoking like the content parameters, if you will. Whereas both of these games are both hardcore difficulty and also like very bloody and gory, which would not be found in, late 80s, late 90s when, they're being developed, so to speak. So that's one of those qualities of just like, again, a developer that understands the influences that they're utilizing in their game, but also like truly, truly commits to the bit in a way that is not always commonplace, I think, when you talk about games that evoke a variety of different eras of design.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, House of Necromancer is just like the joke that keeps on giving in terms of just it's the first time you see that happen with like a instantaneous death thing, it's like that's a funny joke. Yeah, I get that because that's pretty much how it felt, for many of those games at the time. But the fact that it just keeps giving you like variety in that joke is excellent. And yeah, they do feel again right for the character of Belle as well, where they've adding something to her in terms of like these games, like the boxes of like films she's seen, which of course include the booty cheek freak in among there, which is so having a passion for that, and it already differentiates her from what you would consider like your final girl, if you will, from those sort of 80s films, and that she can handle a lot. And again, something that fits this city. She's not from this city, but she's able to handle it, like that in a way that she can live in the scuzzy motel. She can deal with some of the creepier things going on because I don't know, part of her obviously feels that that's not as bad as you would get if you were having someone who's a bit more innocent coming into this. It's a place that doesn't need an innocent person really, and so it's a great reflection of the character, and really another one of those things that having this extra time and space to get to learn bits about her that aren't just like shoved down your throat as being exposition. It's like that. It's a great use of the space, and then it being a funny joke in its own right, and being like actual extra games to play within the game is such a smart move.
Yeah, and to build off of one of the other points that you made before the break in terms of the ways in which you can really kind of like put yourself into the office politics or vibes, if you will. But on top of that, just like the game's sort of like humor sensibilities that have been present throughout the majority of games that are in the sort of puppet underneath the Puppet Combo umbrella. Getting to know the various office workers, like what is his name, Mr. Fatty Cakes or something like that, which is like
it's supposed to be patty cakes, but it's fake.
Right, right. It might be low hanging fruit, but I think that like they go to lengths to reflect various character personalities, not only in like their office setup, which there's a curtain in his office. When you go behind it, it's like he's got a full kitchen in there, which might not be very nice, but I think that at the end of the day, like the environment being reflective of a character, on top of that, to your point about the computers and digging into people's emails and the trash and seeing the types of emails that maybe they wanted to fire off but didn't, is further reflective of their personalities and their sort of like, I suppose, inclinations with dealing with other coworkers. Like you go into your boss's computer at one point and you get to see his response to a competitor that wants to buy out the company. But then also you get to go into the trash and see the draft that he basically scrapped before he sent the response that you can find. And like, it gives you a sort of dynamic and look into who these characters are that is always done for laughs, but at the same time, like it just speaks to the immersive nature of it. It's like, if you go digging, you will find extra information about characters or about various puzzles. And, at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be this like life-changing revelation, but it still is providing you with more context for the world and the players within that you're exploring and spending this time in, which, for people like us is, we appreciate that when developers go the extra mile, if you will.
Yeah, and a lot of it helps to sort of sell you on who could be or couldn't be the killer as well, which is great. Like that, like in entering the office, you get like this established thing where it's like, oh, this person is suspected of being the killer. And so that affects like how you then go into the information you find after that, like for a while, like that. But even then, like other people, the stuff you read or you see does sort of feel you like, oh yeah, but then it could be like, and like I said, you with the red herring nature of these sort of games that we've had in the past, it straight away does make you think, well, it's not going to be that obvious, is it? Like there's going to be something else to this story, which is fine. Yeah. And again, that's part of the giallo sort of sensibility of it all as well. And yeah, I like that. There was always a sort of playful sort of idea of like, again, going on this idea that everyone's a bit messed up in this place anyway, because of the kind of city it is. That like interpret people's like direction and like intention just through those emails and like their workspace and the weirdness of what they're doing, because everyone's sort of foibles and quirks might seem like psychopathic or sociopathic sort of problems if you have that threat hanging over you.
I think that's one of the aspects of this game that I appreciate the most, is that the aspects of the humor in these types of games that have always worked for me as long as I've been playing these games. Like when I go searching, I find more of those, which I find to be, like, I suppose, the evolution of that type of humor that I would hope for, and that it doesn't feel like, and it's not to say that it's always been the case, but like it doesn't feel like those types of interactions and humor are being like shoved down my throat through the natural course of playing this game.
Yeah.
It feels like with them being discoverable, I am getting those rewards at my own pace, so to speak. And I think that for me, like when you're going to be delving into a new gameplay style, such as immersive sim, as I said previously, like those are the types of little nuances that speak to someone that truly understands what is the strength of an immersive sim. And we can move away from maybe more of the predictable aspects of, I suppose, that presentation. So yeah, for me, like those are the aspects that I think are quite strong in shifting to, again, as has been the case for each of Jordan King's games, like in transitioning to the immersive sim, we get to see that transition of mechanics that is a proper understanding of what makes them work, and applying it to a subgenre of horror that has never seen that before to this degree, which I think is what makes this sort of like realm of horror so interesting, and the type of thing where it's like, at this point, I have plenty of examples of why I would be sort of like sight unseen picking up that whatever is released by this developer, or anything that comes out underneath that Puppet Combo banner. But I think, if this was someone's first sort of foray into this sort of like corner of horror, it would be just as strong as if you'd played the previous three, because of the fact that it's building upon these aspects in such a meaningful way. Are there any other aspects of gameplay here, whether as part of immersive sim or otherwise, that stood out to you in being like a notable departure from what we've become used to with Jordan King's approach to game design?
Well, we've been talking about this in terms of sort of workplace horror, and again, a subversion of that here is making it part of this sort of this kind of game. Like in a way, it fits perfectly. When you think of the games we've had before, and like, oh, okay, do this menial task, do that menial task, and it's like, and they are just like plot progression points to get you to the ending. Now they're like an integral part of the game. It's like, and also the way they sort of meld into how you sort of get around the building, how you survive, and all this. It's like, it's such a natural sort of evolution of that idea. And this is something that happens sometimes where you just get the coincidence of playing stuff that is similar but on different levels, that which will have like Horror Bites this week, where you just go, oh, okay, it really does make you see how far we've come from like that original idea of like, oh, workplace horror, which is now what, like 15 years now, is it, or something, or 10 years since? So, since that was starting to become like a big thing. And we've gone from like just sitting in one location, tapping a few buttons, to like sprawling narratives and aping immersive sims. So it's great to see, and I think you could do that in a workplace thing, because you are, the basis of those was always like a small bit of role play in terms of doing like the work of a worker, but now really getting to push that out, especially when there are like these big like celebrated games that are just like do a job, like say Power Wash Simulator, like, which have stories, so to speak, but it's not really anything outside of like, well, just people telling you why you've got to go wash this or do that. And the same with the house flipper things like that. There's email systems and or whatever, but ultimately you're just doing up a house or clearing out a house, and that's fine. That's what those games are, and that's their strengths. But I think that's the difference. Like when you're trying to sort of role play the whole role, not just like the job, like that of the character. That's what video games are great to do. Like, and so this sort of does push workplace horror into a wider sort of scope like that, and really make it interesting again in a way that, you know, it's a comfort. I have to still find, you know, like one of my favorite little subgenres, but it's nice to sort of be shown that it can go somewhere else and we can get more of it, and it can be more expansive at this level, you know, of like indie developers really pushing it out there.
Yeah, and I find that I think for the things that you've been speaking to, like it's a game that very much, for the majority of the experience, like keeps you in the shoes of the every woman, if you will, and that really fits the types of challenges that you're facing. But then again, like in ever expanding the type of gameplay experience that this is, Jordan King, like again, allows that final chapter to really explode in true Giallo fashion, where, you know, not only do you move on from just trying to avoid the skin freak when he actually does show up, and that's actually something I want to circle back to. But like the skin freak doesn't actually show up for a majority of the game in terms of like you having to actually contend with their presence. And what I found to be so satisfying about the way that the game escalates is that a majority of the experience is just you trying to navigate the office and solving these various environmental challenges, right? Oh, this elevator button's broken. How can I play around with the items that are at my immediate disposal to solve this, right? How can I get through this gate to get this item that there's a little bit of a gap I can't fit, but what in this environment can I? And like those types of challenges are reflective of the environment. It's reflective of the skill set of this protagonist for a majority of the experience. So that way, when this skin freak actually shows up and is a threat you have to contend with, you have to, you know, again, early on, just like contend with the skill set of what the protagonist is capable of, which is an office worker. And it's like, yeah, you start by just kind of dodging him and you're trying to avoid his basically patrol route as you press these various buttons. But then like the game really explodes at the end of it when, you know, you're given a handgun, but that really doesn't have any sense of empowerment because he's chasing you around with a chainsaw. And it's like, you have this whole Texas Chainsaw Massacre style combat sequence at the end and whatnot. And so it's like building upon the mechanics that were present for a majority of the game, but then kind of throwing that out the window at the very end of the experience for that finale, which I think ultimately just makes for a conclusion that is like fully leaning into those genre influences that we've mentioned, which is not only the mystery of the giallo, but also the kind of like deranged scuzziness, violence of that era of filmmaking from the 80s and whatnot, that or 70s and 80s that we're both so fond of.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one of those things that was quite impressed me was the restraint. Again, something that Sniper Killer did quite well in maybe smaller fashion, when it's like having these sort of build up. It's because you know there's a threat, you know, at some point. You know that's going to be a threat. It's the anticipation of something happening and it not happening is so well handled here. And I think because you get that prologue where you've had like a smaller slice of finding that out and getting the payoff, it means that you can go longer without really seeing the skin freak and just hearing about the skin freak. Like, it's great. You know, it's one of those things. It works for like, you know, horror movie villains more than it does, say, like action movie stars. Like the constant babble about how fearsome and terrifying they are. Like it works better for someone who's just like, you know, murdering people we want to like, not people we don't give a shit about, sort of thing. So yeah, I think giving us time to sort of establish Belle, you know, she turns up in the prologue as one of the passengers as well, and yeah, I think it's necessary to sort of give her a bit of time and sort of establish the building and really make the eventual appearance of the skin freak matter more. And it is just like, it just makes it more unexpected when it finally comes. It's like a good scare is orchestrated by, you know, how you sort of lead someone into it. It's like the expectation that it could always be coming, but you don't know when, sort of thing. Like that. So yeah, eventually you'll be right, but yeah, it's like it's you will get a few fake outs. Absolutely.
Yeah, and like I said early on in our chat about Skinfreak, I was impressed with the fact that the restraint there is shown even to, the killer's identity, right? It's like it's one of the everybody presents as either I suppose the number one thing, which is just like super hardcore over the top a potential candidate for the killer. And, speaking about one of the aspects of the game, which is like decision making, you can, save this person, you can accuse this person type of decisions that pop up periodically. I really was unable to guess who the killer was by the end of the game, which is not typically the case with a lot of giallo films, outside of main sort of stars of the genre that you might be familiar with. It's one of those things where it's like, more often than not, a red herring or two out there has like some pretty stacked evidence against them long before the big reveal at the end. So for a game such as Skinfreak to really abide by the core tenets of that subgenre and do it justice and provide us with an extremely gruesome and gory ending, which I was a massive fan of. And sort of like the epilogue also of this game, I think was very fitting for 80s horror films. Again, it's still like why we're such big fans of Black Eyed Peas games, and ultimately, it seems anything that comes out underneath this Puppet Combo umbrella of Torture Star Video publisher. So it was nice just to see like a developer and a publisher that we've been such fans of like continue this streak of like pushing the envelope, because it would have been very easy to release something that was along the lines of Sniper Killer or Night at the Gates of Hell, but to continually kind of like push their own envelope, if you will, has been one of those things that's always nice to see.
Yeah, I think it's shown as well when they did like a small game in between with Booty Creek, Cheat Creek. Like that's they know where to sort of put the ideas. It's like, okay, this one's not like a full length game, so we'll just do it for fun basically, and have a small one in between stuff. That's great, but I think now, these last couple of games, it's really sort of proven that they can take those ideas and implement them into a bigger game and just like fit more ideas into one game like that and really push them forward. And because there's generally something absurd going on in most of these things, it's like you can sort of push things a bit further and outside of like what you would expect, maybe with the story or with what happens in the story. And yeah, just this almost common world that they live in, this where everything's a bit odd and all the people are a bit odd. Like that taxi section is like so good for like establishing that again. And like even the old woman who's like goes into like grisly detail about what she saw the Skinfreak's victim was like. It's like, which is like, if you were going to go for like a big red herring sort of thing, that's a one straight where it's like, okay, they're really trying to make her sound like she's fucking, yeah, she was the killer in that moment, like, but yeah, even there, the fact that she sort of gives you a button, she's had a payment, and then like by the time you say that, she's out of the car and gone. So like you're just like, oh, fuck it, yeah, literally fuck it, like who cares, like sort of thing. But yeah, so again, that mix of humor, bits of storytelling to establish like the Skinfreak and like that, and again setting up like potential killers as well in terms of what you're doing, and yeah, it's like that finale as well is just, as you said, just Texas Chainsaw Slash. Well, Manhunt was another one obviously that came to mind again, and it's great. It felt intense and it was earned because of that sort of restraint that we've had and that anticipation, and the fact that you almost get lulled into thinking, well, how punchy is it going to be? How much are we going to see like that? How much is going to be there? And like, yeah, the direction it takes and some of the stuff that happens like is fantastic, and like especially in those sort of closing moments of the main story before you get the epilogue. It is just like, yeah, proper gnarly, wonderful stuff.
Definitely, and I think that an aspect that is always, the best compliment that you could give to any experience is that it just makes me even more excited to see what Jordan King has in store next, right? This idea that like continually is able to tackle new subgenres, but presenting it with some familiar elements, but at the same time continually challenging our expectations of what to expect, essentially. So, for me, and I would be willing to bet yourself as well, for people that are so inundated within the genre and we become so familiar with trends that pop up across it and whatnot, whether it's, AA, AAA, indie games, what have you, like it's so refreshing to have a corner of horror that is so reliably fresh and unique in terms of the ways in which the execution is applied to these various subgenres of horror and whatnot. And it's also great to have such a corner of horror that is so heavily influenced by film. You could say arguably lots of subgenres are influenced by film, but like truly, without question, I think anything that comes out underneath this Puppet Combo umbrella is versed in horror film influence that I would say is like very much the video shop horror kind of era, right? This notion of the scuzzy, the types of horror films that maybe some people gravitate away from, but this corner of horror in particular really gravitates towards those influences and champions them in increasingly gruesome, grisly, and brash ways. So I think that that's what makes, again, this umbrella of indie horror so, gratifying and so entertaining, and really does our, horror sicko hearts proud to see continually challenges those expectations that we have.
Yeah, absolutely does.
That's going to do it for our chat this week on the Skinfreak, a game that we couldn't not end up wrapping the year by chatting about and whatnot. And who's to say we won't chat about it again in the near future before the year's end. But as always, my friend, it's a pleasure chatting horror with you for Safe Room.
Okay, my man. Until the next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Safe Room. If you enjoy the show, please rate us on iTunes and follow us on Twitter and Blue Sky at Safe Room Pod for show updates. As always, our main episodes of Safe Room drop every Monday, but our bite-sized episodes of Horror Bites, our indie horror showcase, drop every Thursday. You can follow the Horror Bites Twitter account at horrorbites_SR. You can join our Discord channel, Safe Room Podcast, to chat with us and other horror fans about the genre we all love. And finally, you can send emails to saferoompod@gmail.com if you'd like to share your thoughts on a game we have or are going to cover. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.
This is a Etsy holiday ad, but you won't hear any sleigh bells or classic carols. Instead, you'll hear something original. The sound of an Etsy holiday, which sounds like this. Now that's special. Want to hear it again? Get original and affordable gifts from small shops on Etsy. For gifts that say, I get you. Shop Etsy. Tap the banner to shop now.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.